is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Thanks for being with us here on Business Now. Well, if you want to see the impact of higher interest rates and that higher expected inflation rate during the week, look no further than right here. Across Australia over the weekend, 1,594 auctions, but the clearance rate, well, it fell to 52.6%. That's according to REA Group. In Sydney, 566 auctions and the clearance rate there, 54.1%, so lower than it had previously been. Another 1,314 properties were sold privately across New South Wales. In Melbourne, 449 auctions, lower than normal. The clearance rate 59.5%, and a further 1,021 properties were sold privately. In Brisbane, there were 119 auctions, a clearance rate here just 40.3%, plus another 1,023 homes sold privately. In Adelaide, 58 auctions, a clearance rate 58.6%. That's off. And an extra 245 homes sold through private treaty. And finally, Canberra, 86 auctions, a clearance rate there 55.8%. That's also lower. And another 93 properties sold privately. So let's bring in here Anne Flaherty, property economist with REA Group. And Anne, look, we talked earlier in the program about retail sales slowing, but I reckon that auction clearance rates are probably almost the instant barometer of the public's attitude towards interest rates and inflation. What do you think?
I agree. I think that, when times start getting a bit tougher, it's often the bigger ticket items, that new home, that new car that people will pull back on until they sort of see what's going to happen with interest rates. On the other hand, if we look at retail spend, we've had 2 years where people haven't been able to go out as much as they'd like. They're still spending in a lot of areas. It's just those bigger items that they're holding back on now.
It's really fascinating also because the auction clearance rates, they're the barometer. But as you and I have talked about before, when you've got around half of the properties not sold at auction, then the owners of those properties, the vendors, have got to make a decision. Do they actually compromise on the price to try and get a sale across the line? Do they leave them on the market and try and hang out for their price? But there's that excess number of properties sitting on the market still waiting to find a buyer.
Yeah, and it's often what we do see when we start to find ourselves in a downturn, I think that when people sell a property, they have an expectation of what price they're going to get. But when prices are starting to come down, it means that they need to readjust those expectations. Now, we have seen clearance rates fall significantly from the start of the year. And that's really to do with those vendors having to readjust their price expectations.
Okay, but there's another aspect of this, and that is people who buy properties and try and flip them, maybe do them up or something along those lines. Construction costs are also rising, and so the economics of that yet haven't picked up maybe the true price of home prices and home values falling.
Home construction costs are a significant issue at the moment. We've seen that the average cost to build a property is up 20% compared to 12 months ago. If you look at the ABS's Building Construction Index, it's actually risen at the fastest rate on record over the past 12 months. So just say it cost $500,000 to build a home 1 year ago. Today, that's going to be around $600,000. So the cost is really substantial, particularly when you factor in that interest rates are now also higher.
But doesn't that also suggest that there could be a real problem in the construction industry in the future because the economics of building a home don't match up with the price of that home at the end of that process? In other words, now that prices are falling perhaps as much as 15 or 20%, but if all of a sudden the construction costs are much, much higher, it may for many people not justify going ahead with that project.
I think that that's very true, and we have started to see developers start to shelve projects. What's particularly concerning is that it's often the more affordable properties that are being shelved, those, more affordable new developments, because for a lot of developers to make a profit at the moment, they have to build at the higher end in order to sort of compensate for those increased construction costs, those labour shortages, the increased time it takes to build. So, we saw a significant number of new properties built over the last few years. It seems reasonable to assume that we're going to see a big reduction over the coming few years as these factors start to impact development.
And just a really quick one. What's your tip tomorrow for the Reserve Bank? Which way do they go? 1/4 or 0.5%, do you think?
Oh, I'm leaning towards 1/4.
There you go. It's going to be interesting to watch it. Anne Flaherty from REA Group. Always good to have in the program. Many thanks for your time today.
No problems.